Kaiten Kenshokai.
Unmute.
Unmute microphone.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Yay, Hiro-san. Does it work?
Hiro-san,
Hi.
can you
Okay.
hear us? You can hear us?
聞こえますか？
This is the office Kaiten Kenshokai.
Okay.
And Chairman, Mr. Harada. 会長、
はい、茂原田です。どうぞ。よろしく。
Harada-san. Harada-san.
竹村さん。
竹村です。よろしくお願いします。はい。
はい、石原君。
石丸。
石丸です。お久しぶりです。
Nice to meet you. はい。
はい
で、
今里です。お願いします。
ハイスクール。
ハイスクール。高校生です。
He's a high school. 今、1年生
高一です。
高1ね。はい。
何歳ですか
16です。
16 years old. はい。
Oh, wow. Okay. Todd, are we waiting for Nabucco?
We are waiting for Nabucco. Nabucco is our translator, correct?
Yes.
どうぞさん。
Mr. Mair and Mr. Hiro, can you understand me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
岩本さん。
Your name, please?
岩本。
岩本さん。
I'm
自己紹
Mr.
介
Yamamoto. Can you understand me?
Mr. Yakamoto.
Iwamoto. Once we met together in Kaiten's ceremony 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
Understand?
Yes.
Okay, thank
2019. Yes. Mhm.
Well, I want to say hello to everyone on social media, on YouTube and Facebook. We will be starting our program shortly. We will play some music, our theme music. We will let everybody in from the waiting room. And then I will say 2 or 3 things. And then I will introduce Mike Mair and Nancy. And Mike, you could take it from there.
Todd, maybe you can ask Hiro-san, can you reach Nabucco? We do not have Nabucco Ito.
Oh, Nabucco. Nabucco just came in the waiting room.
Oh.
Hallelujah. Nabucco Ito. Yay.
伊藤さんだ。伊藤さんのこのこちらは。
いや、まだ入ってないんですよ。
あ、そうか。
Nabucco.
あ、
Hi, Nabucco.
We need her microphone.
Nabucco is going to be very tired after tonight, I think.
Yes.
これでいいんだ。
What a tough job. Oh, boy. Hi, Nabucco.
Good afternoon for you.
おお、伊藤さんだ。ああ、初めて。僕、名前伊藤さん。
真正面からなかなか見てなかった。
よろしくお願いし
Sean,
ます
how you doing? You about ready with the theme music?
Let's make sure Nabucco is doing okay because
Yeah.
she has trouble with hearing.
Okay.
I don't believe I have the theme music.
Oh, you know what? I'll share the theme then. How about that?
I need to get that.
You don't have the theme music. Do you even know what the theme music's called?
No.
Neither do I. I call it the 60s Happy Hour theme song.
Todd, excuse me, can you give the instructions again so Nabucco can tell our guests in Japanese the
Nabucco?
instructions?
We will start now in 10 seconds. We'll play music, let everybody in from the waiting room. I will say hello to everyone, and then I'll introduce Mike, and Mike will start talking about Kaiten.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Um, and
All right.
in case, well, today, I'm sorry, but today I have a sharp pain on my leg, and if it happens, I may stand up or I may go somewhere. I'm very sorry. This is a sudden thing, I can't stop it.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you all for joining us tonight. All right. I'm going to share my sound.
Just won't let in Galaxy S20, but I will use the text chain.
Okay. And also chat maybe in the waiting room.
Yep.
All right. Let's let everybody in now. Everybody, and welcome to our Veterans Breakfast Club VBC Happy Hour. I am Todd DiPastino. I am the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and we are a nonprofit based in Pennsylvania that has been around for 13 years, where we come together with veterans and the public and have veterans share their stories. And boy, tonight, I've been so looking forward to tonight's program, because we have managed to bring over 6 or 7 people from Japan. How many time zones away are we, Mike Mair, from Japan? Maybe
10.
13? 10 time zones away. And so I believe that it's 7 o'clock here on the East Coast in the United States, and it might be 9 o'clock tomorrow morning in Japan.
Right.
I think that's what it is.
Okay.
So tonight we're talking about Kaiten. Kaiten, most people know about kamikazes in World War II. Kaiten were their underwater counterparts. In 1944, the Japanese Imperial Navy began a Kaiten program and ended up training thousands of Japanese sailors to take part in these manned torpedo suicide missions. They managed to sink at least 2 American ships. Mike might correct me on that. Maybe 3, maybe more. And I really want to start off by thanking Mike Mair, who is the author of the definitive book on Kaiten, for making this program possible, reaching out to his friends in Japan who are family members, relatives of Kaiten pilots, people who are in the Kaiten program, and who have agreed to join us tonight. We're so grateful to them for coming on and sharing this important story of Kaiten in World War II. And before we get to the story of Kaiten and we introduce our friends from Japan, I do want to introduce Sean Hall, who is with us. Hello, Sean. He is our Veterans Breakfast Club Director of Programming. How are you, Sean?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Good. I see you're wearing the same shirt that you've been wearing for 1.5 years now.
I haven't washed it yet. It's my good luck charm.
Okay. You are the host of the Scuttlebutt, Understanding Military Culture, the Scuttlebutt podcast. It's released every Monday. What is the program, Scuttlebutt program released today?
If you haven't heard a Scuttlebutt yet, this would be the time to do it. I talk with Army veteran Adam Zafuto. He's a post 9/11 vet, served both in Iraq and Afghanistan. We talk specifically about his time in Afghanistan, how he's feeling about the end of the war, the evacuations. And he's very candid. I'll say that. So it's not for the faint of heart, but if you want to hear an incredible story, now's the time to join the Scuttlebutt. You can check it out. I'll put the link in the chat. You can check it out on our VBC website, which is veteransbreakfastclub.org. It's also on YouTube. Don't miss it.
Okay, very good. And I also want to let people know about a special program that I'm very interested in, because it's coming up on Thursday. It's our VBC, a veteran story with Pete Mecca. And the program is a conversation with this man, Jack Barsky. Jack Barsky was a spy. He was born in East Germany, trained by the Soviet KGB, and he became an illegal in the United States in 1978. That means that he was trained to take a new name and live under a new identity as an American citizen. But the whole time he was spying for the Soviet Union, and he was not caught until well after the Cold War, when he came to light and ended up working a bit for the FBI and counterintelligence. And his story is just so fascinating. I'm so grateful to Pete Mecca for getting Jack to join us on Thursday night, because I'm a big fan, and we don't talk a lot about TV here, but I'm a big fan of this program, The Americans, this FX program that ran for, I think, 6 seasons. Matthew Rees and Kerry Russell star as Philip and Elizabeth Jennings, who look like your, average Americans in the 1980s, but they are really illegals. And in fact, I think some of what they got, some of the details that they got for The Americans, they got from Jack Barsky's story. So if you're around Thursday night in this Zoom link, you could meet and talk to and ask questions to a real live KGB spy. I'm very much looking for that. I want to say hello to Connor Ritchie from Lafayette, Louisiana. Hello, Connor, 16 years old. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And then Henry Shepke from Madison, Wisconsin. How are you, Henry?
Doing good.
And then I believe our senior veteran on the program is, I hate to call you out like this, like I always do, Julia, but how are you doing, Julia Parsons? Good to see you.
I'm doing just fine. Everything is good.
Julia is 100 years old. She's a Navy wave from World War II. She was a code breaker in World War II, helped to decode Enigma. And I just got an email from somebody today. There are 2 people interested in talking to you, Julia. One is a reporter who I think is on this call. And then another is somebody who had the idea that we should all do a Veterans Breakfast Club trip to Carnegie Mellon University, where they have an actual Enigma machine, don't they?
They do.
And this person said we should get you to come with us to show us the Enigma machine and talk us through it.
Well, as well as I can. That's
Which would be pretty darn better than any of us could do. So I think we're gonna try and put that on the calendar if we can. I see Nick DeVoe. Nick DeVoe is with us from St. Lucia. Hello, Nick. And then we have this. And Nick, I think that actually I have you to thank for this program tonight, because I think it's you who put me in touch with Mike Mair.
Yes, that could be right, but really I cannot wait for this program to get going, because this is so amazing, and I know a little bit about all the runnings around behind the scenes that you guys have been scrambling to pull this together, so I'm really looking forward to it.
It's a fascinating story and a very important story. And I was saying to Mike before we got started, and believe me, I'm going to shut up in just a minute. Before we got started, I was saying, I think it dawned on me as Mike and I were putting this program together, that this is not really just a historical program about history, that there's something still vital and important about the story of Kaiten, because it provides a wonderful window into the trauma of war and how the trauma of war is experienced differently in different nations and different cultures. And just talking to Mike, hearing the stories of our guests from Japan tonight, I do understand that the trauma 75 years later still has its own life. And we're going to talk somewhat, I think, about that, how the war is remembered, how Kaiten is remembered in Japan and in the United States. But I want to start by introducing Mike Mair and his wife, Nancy. Hello, Mike. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
Hi there.
You guys are in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. And you, Mike, are the author of this absolutely wonderful book, Kaiten, which is the story of, here we go. Oh, I'm going to skip ahead. This book here, Kaiten, Japan's secret man-suicide submarine and the first American ship it sank in World War II. It's beautifully written. It's extensively researched. And it taught me a whole lot about not only the Kaiten program, but about the World War II and the Japanese war effort. how did you get interested in this subject?
Well, I would like to start, if I could, first by greeting our Japanese guests that are with us this evening. And so, Nobuko, since we need to translate in short segments, if you would wave your hand at me, I will stop so that you can translate for our guests. But may I first welcome all of our Japanese guests, and thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight. I have encouraged Veterans Breakfast Club for a long time to consider offering programs with people from other countries and other cultures so that we can help the audience here in the USA understand what families went through and loved ones that, of course, were lost as well, and which I feel is very, very important, which is why the book Kaiten made an attempt, and I think was successful in trying to explain what happened from both sides, the American point of view and the Japanese point of view. And so for that reason, Nancy and I are thrilled that you have joined us tonight to share your experiences. So, Nobuko.
私はマイケル・メアです。皆さん、日本からご参加いただいて本当に嬉しいと、今日、お礼を申し上げたいと思います。日本で、私はこのズームショーを非常にこの会を楽しみにしておりまして、様々な文化、様々な国の方が参加されるということで大変意義があると思います。日本の皆さんには、また他の国の皆さんもご家族を亡くされたりとか、その後どのような苦労があったかというようなことがお持ちだと思いますので、ここでそれをお話しできいただければなと思います。大変、そういう意味で意義があることだと思いますし、それが私はこの両方側から、アメリカ、日本両方側からこのKaitenという本を書いたという理由でもあります。
Thank you. Well, for our guests, the first questions that we had is we would like to learn about the Kaiten pilots and how did they become volunteers and participate in the Kaiten Special Attack Corps. How were they selected, and a little bit about the type of training that they went through.
そして特にここで話をお聞きしたいというのは、どのようになぜKaitenの搭乗員の方がこのような特別な死を覚悟したような作戦に自ら志願されたかということ、そしてどのようにその志願者の中から選ばれたのか、またどのような訓練を受けたのか、そのようなことが話せればと思います。
I think, first of all, Nobuko, I think we need to actually show a picture, Todd, of what a Kaiten is, and I'll explain, and Nobuko will help us.
Got it. Got it. I'm on it. As I said, I'm not as fast as Ellie is, but here we go. Here's a good picture. Okay. Let me see here.
As our guests will explain, the Kaiten was a lengthened Type 93 torpedo used in the Pacific War, and a cabin was placed amidships with a tiny crank-up periscope. And the amount of explosive power this weapon had was 3,418 pounds of explosive, 1.5 tons, which was many times more than a 500 or 600 pound torpedo warhead. This weapon could move at a very fast speed underwater. It was difficult to operate, as the Kaiten pilots and Toshihiro Kanada explained to me. It was difficult to operate. However, this weapon had the ability to break the back of a major ship, such as a battleship or an aircraft carrier. This weapon is little known in the US by Americans, and there are probably many people in Japan that still are unfamiliar with this weapon, but thanks to the efforts of Kaiten Kai and Kaiten Kenshokai, we all can learn. So, Nobuko?
Okay. 回転について少しだけご説明申し上げます。回転は太平洋戦争で使われた魚雷に魚雷に人が乗って攻撃する方のもので、ご覧のように潜望鏡、小さな潜望鏡がついています。爆薬は大変大きいものが付けられておりまして、1.5 トンに相当する爆薬が付けられています。またこのスピード、走るスピードも相当速いものであり、その操縦が大変難しいものだったというふうに、私は信子のお父さんの俊原さんから聞いています。小灘さんから聞いています。この海戦に使われた兵器なわけですけれども、あまりもちろんアメリカ軍に知られておりませんでしたし、その後も日本でもアメリカでもあまり、知られていないのではないかと思うんです。それで、検証会の皆様が大変努力をされて、この回転というものについて、世に広めておられます。
The Kaiten was developed primarily by Hiroshi Kuriki and Sikio Nishina, the two officers that were the primary developers of this weapon. And the concept began in 1943, and by September of 1944, a secret training base had been established on Ashijima Island in Tokuyama Bay. And so if we could, I would like to hear from our Japanese guests explain a little bit about the development of the Kaiten, and also the young researcher Yamamoto, who has done research that has helped me understand that there were actually several officers involved with development, and there was also some opposition to the development. Nobuko?
Okay. この回転は日本の黒木と西名によって主に開発設計されておりました。そして、1943年にそのアイデアが出まして、44年の秋にはその回転の基地が、大津島また徳山にできております。で今回開発に関して、山本さんという日本の研究者の方から、その2人ではなく、5人の人が関わったという指摘がありまして、今回そのことも含め、日本の出席者の皆様に少し回転の、開発について、お聞きしたいと話していただきたいと思っています。
Nobuko, can you invite our Japanese guests to comment if they would?
Okay. すみません。どなたか回転の開発、回転の設計について、日本からの出席者の方お話ししていただけますでしょうか。簡単にで結構です。
設計というのも、まずはどういう考えで回転というものが開発されたということなんですけども、まず太平洋戦争第二次世界大戦始まって、米国と戦争始まりましたけども、その戦場は日本の艦艇飛行機は通常の方法では敵に近づくことさえ困難になっていました。厳しい戦局を日本側に有利に変えるために、天敵必殺一致を期すために、当時酸素魚雷が最高の秘密兵器として認識されており、それに乗って生身の人間が操縦することで命中精度を高めて敵に体当たりしてその目的を 果たそうとする意識が芽生えました。代表的な、はい、どうぞ。
はい。After the formation of the unit, first stage of operation, during the wartime, especially latter half of the battle, and Japanese ships and planes had difficulty even approaching the enemy in the usual way. And oxygen compressed type of torpedoes were recognized as the best weapon to change the tide of war in our favor, in Japanese side's favor. Andすいません、続けてください。
黒木対ロテナント黒木は人間魚雷の計画を次のように説明しています。このままでは日本は滅亡のほかはない。今何か決定的な手を打たなければ悔いを潜在に残すことになる。私たちは一戦闘員に過ぎないが、我々の立場で最善と信ずることをやりたい。いつでも命を捨てる覚悟はしている。しかし、ささやかな命ではあるが、捨てて使いある方で捨てたい。そのためには、この兵器を考えざるを得なかった。これが黒木隊の考えを端的に表現した言葉です。
Let me explain the reasons why the Kaiten pilot volunteered for the suicide attack weapons. I'd like to read the words by Lieutenant Kuroki, who was the developer of this Kaiten. If nothing is done, Japanese will be destroyed. If we do not take any decisive action now, we will leave regrets forever. We are just soldiers, but we want to do what we believe to be the best in our position. I'm ready to give up my life at any time. However, although it's a small life, I want to throw it away in a worthwhile way. To do that, I had to develop this weapon. These are words from Lieutenant Kuroki.
For our American viewers, I would like to explain something, if I may. Many Americans do not make a distinction between kamikaze aircraft pilots that drove an airplane into a ship. The Kaiten Special Attack Force were all volunteers. They were well educated. Many of them, such as Toshihiro Kanata, were Imperial Japanese Naval graduates of their Naval Academy at Tajima, and very well educated officers. The Japanese Navy was very westernized. The reason why is because the British had helped develop the Japanese Navy after the Meiji Restoration in 1879. So they were a very professional fighting force with well-educated individuals as part of the Imperial Japanese Navy. With my experience and the way that Mr. Kanata explained to me is they certainly valued their lives. They valued their lives as much as any other person does. However, as Nubuko's father, Mr. Kanata explained to me, there was great fear that Japan would be invaded. They knew that the war had been lost. The government would not give in. And they knew that their families, their siblings, brothers and sisters and parents would perish on the beaches with an Allied invasion. And there would be tremendous loss of life. As Mr. Kanata explained to me, that they felt that if they could sink a capital American warship and enough American warships, perhaps a peace treaty or truce could be negotiated rather than the home islands invaded. So the sense of purpose was very, very strong and very sincere. Tomoko? Excuse me, Nabucco, excuse me.
アメリカではちょっと神風と混同されるところがございますけれども、ちょっとカイテンのことを言うと、カイテンは、海軍兵学校を出たような大変、教育が十分にされた、人たちの志願によって行われたものです。日本の海軍というのは、イギリスがもともと指導していたということもありまして、大変西洋的でありまして、また非常に優れたプロフェッショナルな軍でありました。で、コナンさんから説明を受けたんですけれども、カイテンの搭乗員というのは他の人と同じように大変命を大切に思っていた。けれども、その状況からして非常に苦しい状況にあり、もう本土上陸がいつあるかという状況でしたので、で政府の方はもちろん戦争追行という、やめる気配はございませんでしたし、このままでいくと、家族、兄弟、また愛する人々が非常に危ない目にある、殺されてしまうかもしれないという危機感があり、何千何万、何百万という人がもしかしたら上陸で死ぬかもしれないという、そういう、恐れを抱いていたのが搭乗員であります。なので、なんとか攻撃でアメリカの船を沈めて、その結果、ある程度有利な状況で平和条約というのを結べないだろうか。本土上陸の前にそのような形で休戦あるいは平和的な終結をできないだろうかというふうに考えていたというふうに私は小野田さんから説明されました。
How were young men selected for the Kaiten Special Attack Corps? And if any of our guests would have a personal story to help explain a family member or a story that would help illustrate Nabucco, how the volunteers were selected.
カイテンのその搭乗員にどのように、選ばれたかということについて、どなたか個人的な経験、ご家族が行かれたとかですね、知っていることがあれば、ぜひお聞きしたいんでしょうけど、どうです？お聞きしたいんですが、いかがでしょうか？ご存知の方、どのように、若者がカイテンの搭乗員として選ばれたか。
この写真があったらちょっと準備してね。
いや、そこまでだから。ご遺族のどなたか聞かれた方、お話できませんか？
はい、My name is Nobuaki Kawasaki from I would like to speak Japanese. 私のおじがカイテンに乗りまして行ったんですけれども、海軍機関学校を卒業いたしまして、それで自ら志願をしたということです。それで家族の方には、私の父などもそうですけれども、一回鹿児島の実家に帰りまして、それで、カイテンに登場するということは、言わないで、それで、山口の方に戻ったんですけども、最後に私の父と広島の今の原爆ドームの近くで会って、それが私の父が兄、私の叔父ですけども、に会う最後だったということです。とにかく自分で志願をして、家族には何も言わないで、家族のため、将来の日本のための平和のためにですね、自ら志願をしていったということです。硫黄島の方で、亡くなったというふうに、私は父から聞いておりますし、カイテンの資料館にも写真が掲載されております。
I'm Kawasaki, and I'd like to explain my personal situation. And my uncle, my father's brother, was in Kaiten, and in his case, he was a student of Navy engineering school, and he applied for Kaiten. He volunteered for Kaiten and selected as a pilot. And before the operation, before he was assigned to the team, he returned home to see his parents and secretly say goodbye because he could not express, were not allowed to say anything about Kaiten because it's a secret operation. So he didn't say anything, but he met his parents before he went. And my father, brothers of his, the Kawasaki, met last in Hiroshima. And so I hear that my uncle applied, volunteered for Kaiten and selected. And I hear he died in Iwo Jima Island. And his picture is you can see that his picture in the Kaiten Memorial Museum.
May I ask also for our American viewers, the reason why the term pilots is being used for a naval underwater manned torpedo weapon is that the trainees that were trained to use this weapon came from naval aviation in Japan. Late in the war, there was very little fuel to train pilots to fly aircraft, with tremendous shortages of fuel and other items needed. And so the term pilots became used to describe the young men that were part of this particular program. Nobuko, if somebody could actually address a little bit about the secret training base, the very first one in Tokuyama Bay at Ashijima Island, and also to what did the volunteers have to learn to operate this weapon?
Okay. ちょっと搭乗員、パイロットってなぜ使われるかというと、航空機の方で、勉強されて、研究されて、それで海底の方に来られた方が多いので、そういうふうな言葉が使われています。で、出席者の日本の方にお聞きしたいんですけども、海底の基地での訓練はどのようなものであったか、どのような、教育、訓練を海底の基地では受けていたかということについて、どなたか教えていただけますでしょうか。
はい、海底の訓練ですけども、徳山の海底の基地はもともと日本の酸素魚雷、超魚雷の試験場として基地が設けられて、その後海底の訓練基地となりました。で、基本的な訓練は徳山の小津島で行われて、約1人の訓練回数が約30回で、それで30回ぐらい訓練した後、静止画に通されて刺激されたということです。それであと、それ以外の基地は前方展開部隊として、基本的には短時間の訓練を行いますけども、ほぼ前線基地ということで、基本的な訓練、最初のスタートから、刺激するまでの基本的な訓練は大津島の海底の基地で行われていました。以上です。
大津島で訓練してからそちら他の基地に行ったということでよろしいんですかね。はい。はいOkay, I'd like to explain the training of Kaiten. The volunteers gathered in Ozushima base in Tokuyama. Originally the base was a torpedo experiment base, and it was converted to the Kaiten training base. And in Ozushima, the volunteers were trained by riding on a kaiten about 30 times, 30 times. And then after that, they were distributed to other bases, or they stay in a Ozushima base, and they departed on Kaiten from those bases.
はい、もう一人、基本的には、回転は一人乗りのいわゆる兵器です。で、教官が乗るときは、操縦席の周りの空間、隙間に寝っ転がって、訓練を指導したということです。以上です。
Okay. And the torpedo was very small in size, and it's a one-manned weapon. So during the training, it's necessary to have a teacher inside also. So, but there was not enough place for two people. So the teacher lied down in the inside of Kaiten, while the trainee was in the seat.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike, but I want, if it would be okay, Nobuko, to make clear, Nobuko, this is your father pictured here?
I'm sorry, it's not my father.
That's not your father. Is this your father?
Oh, yes, this is my father.
Okay. I found this on the internet somewhere, and it was labeled as your father, and I must have gotten that wrong.
And
this
Papa,
is your
uniform
father.
is different.
Yes, I should have known. This is your father.
Yes, this is my father.
And here's another picture, I believe, of your father.
That's true.
Your father is here in this picture?
I think so. I'm not very sure, but I think so.
This is your father here?
Maybe. I'm not really sure. Yes.
Mike, do you think it is?
Probably.
Okay.
I'm not certain. I do know the very first color photo Nobuko's father sent to me himself.
Okay.
I see.
And these are Kaiten cadets. These are trainees. Did your father talk to you much, Nobuko, about why he volunteered?
No, actually, he didn't speak much about Kaiten and the operation or what he felt during the wartime directly to me. Like it's probably similar to Mike's father. He didn't speak much, and he was active in organizing the Kaiten club and everything. He was vigorously studying about the Kaiten facts, but he didn't say anything to the family.
Right, he didn't talk about it much.
Yes. The co-inventor Hiroshi Kuriki died in a training accident the very first week of operations on Ashijima Island. And Mr. Kanata was present at that time. He had just arrived at the base, and he told me that he was up all night with other trainees on boats. They were sweeping Tokuyama Bay with a wire cable to try and locate the Kaiten, and it was not found until the next morning after a training accident. And so Seikyo Nishina took over command of the training for the trainees. And if our guest could tell us a little bit about the preparations for the Kikasui mission to Ulithi. For the Americans watching this, the Kikasui mission was the inaugural first use of the Kaiten weapon. Ulithi Atoll is an circle of islands located about 350 miles southeast of Guam. This is where Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet gathered. the Kaiten weapon was most effective attacking anchorages or harbors, as it was difficult to control. It had to be kept 15 feet below the surface of the water, so it was not spotted. The Kaiten had to be transported on the decks of large fleet submarines, piggybacked, so that they were carried to the target area on a submarine and then given a bearing to be released towards the target. Once the Kaiten were released, it was up to the Kaiten pilot to use the small periscope to locate a target and make a run on the target. So would our guests like to address this? And for the American viewers, my father was a survivor of the sinking of the USS Mississinewa, which was a large fleet oiler anchored at Ulithi Atoll. And it was struck by, I sincerely believe with all my research, Seikiel Nishina on 20th of November, 1944, in a catastrophic explosion. And my father did survive that particular sinking. And like Mr. Kanata, my father did not speak about this until I was over 40 years old. So a long time. So would any of our Japanese guests like to talk a little bit about the Kikasui mission?
And I will just interrupt just to let the viewers put their attention on the Kaiten torpedoes here on the deck of a submarine, and this is how they were launched. You can see it right here.
菊水のこと、初めての作戦だったと思うんですけど、回転を使用した。それについて、ちょっとどなたかお話をしていただけますでしょうか。どなたでも。
奇襲作戦についてです。
ウルシーで行われたわけで、グアムの南東300キロというところで回転がその潜水艦に積まれて発進して、ミシシネマという、メアさんのお父様が乗っておられた船がそこ、輸送、油を運んでた船が停泊中に海底の攻撃を受け爆発したというのが1944年の11月ですけれども、メアさんのお父さんも40年間そのことはお話になっていなかったということでした。で、この菊水作戦について、何かどういうふうになって決まったとか、そういうようなことをお話しいただけますでしょうか。
Excuse me, Todd, if you could show Nishina and photos of the Mississinewa burning as our guests explain.
Great.
原田会長からお話ししてもらいます。
はい。
それでは私は、身内の家内の母親の弟、家内の叔父が、菊水隊の E37 戦の艦長をいたしました。この出撃はもう戦争の終わることが近い時に、行った、これは作戦と言えるのかどうか分かりませんけど、自分たちが回転を、大津島から、パラオ、もう一つはウルシですかね。そちら方面に3つの潜水艦で運んだというのが、もう昭和19年の11月8日スタートです。だからもう戦争の終わり頃の作戦ですね。したがって完璧な技術がまとまっていったわけではありません。で、私の叔父の37戦は3つ行った中のパラオの方へ向かいました。パラオとあと2つはウルシですけど、一番先輩格の潜水艦長だったと思います。したがってこれは最初からの艦長ではなく、どなたかの都合が悪くなり、 急遽艦長ということでしょうけど、調査の艦長が多いんですが、中佐で行ったと思います。で、これが一番不幸を被った37戦です。やっぱり向こうに着きますと、必ず軍の位置を確認するために。
今、入りました。はい。はい、どうも。
いいかね。
Sorry, I was a little late to join.
いいと思います。続けて。ここまで訳されると思います。
Okay. I'd like to say from the my wife's uncle was a captain of I-37 submarine, and he was dispatched to the Palau, but the other two submarines were dispatched to Uthi Island, and it was, as you said, November of 1944. So it was we were nearing to the end of the war. So we were running out of things, and so they tried best, but the condition was not perfect. There were a lot of lacking of materials, or training may not be fully completed because of the shortage of the weapons and other things, fuels and everything. And I hear that my wife's uncle was a captain, but probably he was assigned to replace the former captain, and he didn't have a lot of experience so at that time.
For the American viewers, what has just been explained is that 3 submarines were dispatched on the Kikasui mission, on the inaugural mission of Kaiten, and I-37. This was captained by Mr. Harada's wife's uncle, went to Palau Islands, specifically Castle Passage, where there were a large number of American ships. It was a diversionary attack that occurred on November 19th, 1944. And this was to draw attention away from Ulithi, where submarines I-47, pronounced E-47 in Japan, and I-36 were to attack Ulithi. Out of the 8 Kaiten at Ulithi, only 5 were able to be launched. 3 of them malfunctioned and were stuck in their racks on the fleet submarines. And so there were 2 Kaiten that penetrated Ulithi anchorage. That was Tsikio Nishna, who hit USS Mississinewa, and also Ensign Tashi Imanishi, who penetrated the anchorage, and he was depth charged and sunk by U.S. Navy forces, and his body was recovered 2 days later. So there was tremendous loss of life in the Kaiten program. Over 2,000 sailors total were lost. Mississinewa was a complete loss with 63 lives lost, and most of the rest of the crew were burned or hurt in this particular attack. The USS Underhill was a destroyer escort that was in Leyte Gulf near the Philippines in 1945 in July, and rammed a Kaiten launched from I-53, and it was piloted by Jun Katsuyama, and he was rammed, and he had his warhead armed, and it blew the entire bow off of the USS Underhill. The remaining wreckage of the ship with the survivors was sunk by American forces gunfire. This particular attack greatly alarmed the U.S. Navy. The reason is that they thought Ulithi could not be penetrated by the Imperial Japanese Navy and yet it was with a new weapon that the U.S. forces knew nothing about. At first, they felt it was a two-man midget submarine, Koheteki, such as used at Pearl Harbor in Sydney, Australia. However, it was not. It was a new weapon, and it was not fully realized until a partial remains of a Kaiten were recovered on a reef at Ulithi, and they were recovered in December 1944. That's when the U.S. Navy realized that there was a very serious threat to American anchorages in the Pacific. So a warning did not even go out to American forces from Admiral Nimitz until January of 1945. I will also comment, the crew of USS Mississinewa did not know until 1999 what had sunk their ship. There was not a single survivor, my father included, that knew it was a Kaiten that sank their ship. That's how many decades went by. Nabucco, I know that that's an awful lot to comment on, but
はい。Okay. 私は菊水作戦では3つの潜水艦が出たというふうに聞いておりますけれども、理解しておりますけれども、E37 が36、そういう、パラオのコッソル海峡ですかね、そこに、行って、またウルシーの方に向かったということですね。で、5つ、そのウルシーでは、回転は5艇が、向かったんですけども、で3艇は故障のため発進ができなかった。で、ウルシー湾をうまく通り抜けられたのは2つであって、それは、で今にしては、アメリカの海軍に、最終的にやられて、しまったということで、2日後に彼の遺体が見つかっています。で、で、アンダーヒルも勝山艇によって、破壊され、またそのアンダーヒル氏も E53 と戦って、それをその乗員ものとも殺したというのがあります。で、そのアメリカ海軍はウルシーでもって新しい兵器が出たということに非常に驚き、で、全く知らない兵器だった。最初は特殊潜航艇、高標的ではないかというふうに思ったわけですけれども、実際そので残っている部分とかを引き上げてみると、どうやら新兵器らしいと。で、この全くアメリカ軍の知らない兵器が出てきたということで、深刻な脅威を感じたということです。で、その回転であるということは、本当にあと、もう乗員が亡くなるような、そのような後まで、回転の攻撃で沈んだということは分かりませんでした。
Hey, Mike, I wonder if we could ask some questions here that were put in the chat. I translated them into Japanese and put them into chat because I'm so good at Japanese. I use Google Translate. But Henry Shepke asked the good question, how many Kaiten pilots are still alive today?
回転の搭乗員で今もご存命の方というのはおられるのか、あるいは何人おられるのか、そういうご存知でしょうか。
これだね、これだね。
おととし、1名横浜の在住の方が追悼式に来られました。
まだ健在でしょ。
多分年齢今95歳だと思います。
それはご存命の方で、ご存知の生きてらっしゃると分かっている方はお一人ということでよろしいですかね。
はい。
We know that one pilot is still alive. He lives in Yokohama and he joined the memorial ceremony. He's now 95 years old.
Boy, oh boy.
すみません、途中で失礼するんですが、ちょっと大学の授業がありますので、ちょっとここら辺で抜けさせていただきます。失礼します。 excuse me, I have an university class, so I will exit this meeting. So thank you for letting me participate. Mr. and Mrs. Mike, I'm looking forward to seeing in Yozushima next year. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. See you.
Were any of our Japanese guests alive during World War II?
二次大戦の時にすでに生まれておられたという方はいらっしゃいますか？日本の参加の方で。
もうそれは原田会長。
Mr. Harada, Chairman of the Kaiten Memorial Kenshokai. And Mr. Iwamoto.
私も戦前というか戦中です。1944, 10 February, I was born in Manchuria. そしてしかも、回転が認められた年がちょうど私が生まれた年ですので、まあ言うなれば回転とともに私は生きてきたと、こういうことです。これを言いたかったのでありがとうございました。Thank you. Thank you so much.
I was born in the same year when Kaiten was recognized. So I was born before the war ended. So my life has always been with Kaiten since the birth of Kaiten, and my own birth are the same. So I wanted to say this thing here. So I'm very glad.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sorry to interrupt, but I'm the one of the translator of the material. Three of us retired new JMSDF retired naval officers. I'm a retired Navy captain. I served the Navy 33 years, and 1/3 of my career was a submarine. Another 1/3 is assignments with the U.S. Navy, and another 1/3 is miscellaneous, such as Cabinet Information Office. And I was born in 1941, so I was only close to 5 years old when the war was over. But because of the naval influence of my family, I'm a sort of a Navy family, and I heard lots about the good story and bad stories. As well as I was submarine, so I served the Navy 30, as I mentioned, 33 years. 1/3 of my career was a submarine, and one of them was a flag lieutenant to Admiral Toki. He was chief engineer I-53, and he precisely described the operation against the Bunker Hill Underhill destroyer escort sinking. Yes, so. I myself, liaison officer to the U.S. Navy. I stationed in Hawaii, in Pearl Harbor. So I'm really interested in the submarine operation of the Japanese Imperial Navy. Sorry to interrupt.
No, Captain. Thank you, Captain, for introducing yourself and for joining us tonight. Can I ask you, Greg, what you remember of World War II, if anything? Do you remember the end of the war, maybe a little bit of memory?
Yes, I was in Osaka before the big, after the last big air raid by B-29. I was in Osaka. I still remember vividly the air raid in the night bombardment at that time. And I evacuated to Sea of Japan side prefecture, Shimaneken, where my mother originally from. So I only remember the air raid on V-29 in the World War II in Osaka. And also, of course, many memories about the occupation forces, the association with them.
Wonderful. There are two organizations, Kaiten Kai, which was founded by Nubuko's father, Mr. Kanada, in 1962, and Kaiten Kenshokai, also founded the same year, 1962. The distinction is that Kaiten Kai membership were Kaiten pilots, and Kaiten Kenshokai were submariners who were associated with Kaiten and their families. And so would Mr. Harada or anybody else like to comment about Kaiten Kai and Kaiten Kenshokai?
I have a little bit different opinion on that association. As far as I understand, there was a big retired Imperial Navy submarine members, Tokusenkai. It's a midget submarine, mainly a midget submarine who originally started at the Pearl Harbor and along to the Sydney attack. And that was called Tokusenkai, but because of age of the consisting members, they are, I think still that association itself exists, but they stopped the activities. The another one is, as you mentioned, Kaiten Kai and Kaiten Kenshokai, but there's a little slight difference in between the two associations. Remember, Kaiten is different from midget submarine. Kaiten is once dispatched from the submarine, they were not able to return. Nothing but to attack or make success or kill themselves by the automated systems, explode the Kaiten. So there's many misunderstanding among the retired submarine members, because they dispatched the Kaiten and tracking the sound, and on the final stage, they heard the explosion, and they thought they could make success to attack. But I compared the U.S. Navy submarine operation, World War II operation as well, and the Japanese submarines Kaiten operation, and compared. And there's quite a few success. Most of them are explosion, not the attack, self-explosion. That is that's what I study through the materials. So there's a little difference between the two associations, the Kaiten Kai and the Midget Submarine Association. As I mentioned, there's a big difference between the two weapons. Midget submarine you can control, and you can evade the enemy, and if I may say, they could return the port. But Kaiten, once dispatched, they could not return. So there's a little difference on the members of the, so there's a slight gap between the two associations. I remind you that,
And Greg, I would say that that difference is not a little one.
No.
One is a one-way trip. The other, you can come back.
Yes, since you help a little bit, yes, there's a big difference between Kaiten Kai and Midget Submarine Association. Yes, you true.
Mike Mair, could you explain this picture a little bit? Who is pictured here and what this obelisk is or column is behind them?
Yes, indeed. And then we'll ask Mr. Kawasaki to comment. This group is a very special group referred to as the Bereaved Families. This particular group has had a family member who had died in a Kaiten mission. There was a very special dinner when Nancy and I visited Japan the night before the Kaiten memorial ceremony, where these families joined with us, and we were very honored to be there. And this was very special to me. It was perhaps the highlight of my visit to Japan. I had spent 26 years or 25 years at that point in time working on this story and had very much had difficulty finding closure. At that time, translator Tomoko Nishizaki took me around to each of the families' tables, and I was able to listen to their story about their loved one who was lost on a mission, and also the families explaining what they experienced with the bombings at the end of the war, how they survived the war, how their families managed to get along. I also asked about how did they learn that their family's loved one had been lost on a Kaiten mission. That particular opportunity gave me a great deal of closure. This picture shows myself, we're visiting with members of the bereaved families so that I could listen to their stories and understand. This was very, very important to me. It was the most important reason for our trip to Japan. And thanks to Kaiten Kenshokai, we had that opportunity. And I would like to ask Mr. Kawasaki to comment about the bereaved families, please.
Mike, can I ask you a question first?
Yes,
Why
sir.
was this so important to you? Why was it so important to you to hear from the surviving families of Kaiten?
We cannot possibly understand an entire story until we have the opportunity to listen to everyone that was involved. How could I possibly understand the concept of Kaiten unless I had the opportunity to listen to a Japanese family, in this case, several families, explain about their loved one that volunteered for this program. It was really important to me to obtain closure and have a more complete understanding, not just the American side.
Here's a picture of you at that dinner. Were you the only or first, you and Nancy, Americans or non-Japanese people at this event?
Yes. Our thanks to Harada-san, who invited us to join the bereaved families.
Would it be too much to say that meeting the families kind of made all this real to you in a way that before it was a little abstract and historical, but
the human experience can't possibly be understood unless we understand each other. It is the only way we can really understand. And without that opportunity to meet the Japanese families face to face, I would not have had that closure that I needed or a better understanding.
Wonderful.
先ほど最初に出ました検証会の説明がありました。慰霊祭に皆さん参加されて、その後、西崎さんの通訳でもって、ご家族の方から話を聞けた。そのKaitenで、親、あるいは知っている人を亡くした方が、どのような苦労があって、またそのKaitenで、親戚が亡くなったという、家族が亡くなったということをどのように受け止めていらっしゃるかというようなことをお聞きすることがありましたので、非常に意味がある貴重な体験でした。で、川崎さんには、ちょっとそのコメントをいただきたいなと思ってるんですけども、日本の家族が、どのようにKaitenを捉えたか、愛する人がKaitenで死んだということをどういうふうに考えていらっしゃるか、どんなことであったかということを知ることで初めて私はKaitenのことを全体的に、理解することができるんではないかと、より深い理解を持てるんではないかと思いましたので、非常に、貴重な体験でした。顔を見て、会って話して、理解することができるというふうに私は思っております。
はい、私、川崎ですけれども、やはり私の叔父がですね、Kaitenに行ったということについては、本当に日本の平和のためにですね、日本の将来のために行ったということで、自分の命を捧げたわけですけれども、これは叔父はああいう形で戦争に行って亡くなりましたけれども、私たちがですね、この日本のために、あるいは世界の平和のために、何らかの形で頑張っていかなきゃいけないなということで、先ほどまで息子が出ていましたけれども、息子と一緒に、毎年このKaitenの慰霊祭には参加しております。私ももう61になりましたけれども、大学生ぐらいの時から毎年参加させていただいております。亡くなった叔父の後を継いでですね、私も何らかの形で、日本の平和のためにですね、頑張っていきたいなという、そういう気持ちでおります。以上です。Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm Kawasaki, and my uncle died in action by Kaiten, but I believe that he offered his life for peace. So that I believe that he died for peace. So I think we, who live here now, should endeavor to make peace and to keep the peace. And my son, who left this room before, also joins the memorial ceremony by Kaiten Kenshokai. I myself, every year, has been joining the Kaiten Memorial Ceremony since I was a university student. I'm already over 60, and it's been so many years. I'd like to succeed the spirit of peace, which I received from my uncle, and I'd like to work for peace.
Arigato, Kawasaki-san.
Speaking of the Kaiten Memorial Ceremony, here is a picture of one. Mike, you spoke at one of these ceremonies a few years ago.
This is the ceremony.
This is the ceremony at which you spoke.
Yes, yes.
And you told, before we went live here, you told me a story about these pictures, and I think it's a little funny. Here is a speaker at the ceremony, and you'll notice, he's facing the memorial. He's turned away from the guests to face the memorial, to say his words to the memorial. And then you have another person who got up, and you can say who he is, also spoke with his back to the audience.
Yes, this is Mr. Harada. When he was facing the Kaiten Memorial, the symbols on the memorial mean Kaiten. In this memorial, each of the speakers initially who rose to speak at the beginning of the ceremony faced this memorial. Well, I did not understand culturally why this was the case. And so several minutes went by, and I listened to several speakers, and I began to get very worried. I didn't know, would I make an error that would be disrespectful in some manner? I didn't know which way to face. Do I face the memorial, or do I face the people there present in the audience for the ceremony? And I began to feel some panic, and I turned around and looked at my translator, Tomoko, and I said, Tomoko, which direction do I face when I speak? And she reached up and touched my shoulder, and she said, don't worry, Mike, you'll be facing the audience. I did not realize until after the ceremony that, and please correct me, Nabucco helped me here, I believe they were speaking to the Kaiten pilots, their spirits, by facing the memorial, if I am correct in that assumption.
Okay.
Do you mind if okay, after translation.
Okay. はい。で、その海天検証会の慰霊祭の写真が出ましたけれども、そこではメアさんが話しました。で、メアさんが言うことには、なんか失礼がないかと非常に心配したと、それは原田さんがお話になっている写真が出ましたけれども、原田さんはその火に向かってお話になって、でも、そちらに向けばいいのか、聴衆の方を向いて話せばいいのかと非常に心配してもどうしようかと思ったんですけれども、聴衆の方に向いて話せばいいというふうに通訳の方に聞いたので、そういうふうにいたしました。で、もう、回転で亡くなった方はもう神様になっておられるわけですから、そちらの方は、そちらの方にも、向かなければいけないとは思うんですけれども、そういうようなことがありました。
I'd like to add a little bit more about the members Kaiten. My uncle was graduated, studied in the Tokyo University, and while he was a student, he was called for, and he joined the Navy and reserve officer, as a reserve officer, and he participated in the Shinyo Tai. It's a motorboat with the ammunition is on the bow and attack to the surface, on the surface to the surface targets. It is pretty difficult and to criticize how they felt at the time the war ended, why they joined, why the Japanese did such a thing. Of course, I was a little boy and I studied later after all through the sub materials. But I myself consider this way: when you stand in a narrow valley and water and sand, or all of a sudden they're flooding the narrow valley, and behind you, you have your loved ones. How do you do? What you should do? Those members, the younger generation, forced to participate in the war, they have to protect the country, protect the loved ones. That's why they sacrificed themselves to defend and died for their loved one. That's my consideration on those who joined the Special Attack Forces.
Our program is coming close to an end. So Todd, you'll need to move things along. We haven't heard from Mr. Takamura and also our young researchers such as Akil Ito. And so if we could get guidance from Kaiten Kenshokai leaders as to what they would like to discuss here as we get closer to the end.
もうそろそろ、終わりに近くなってまいりましたので、竹村さんからちょっと、企画についてお話していただきたい。また伊藤さんの方から、それから、検証会の方からちょっと最後のコメントをいただきたいと思っています。竹村さん。
竹村、よろしくお願いします。私は大津島の回転機器が徳山で、プロデュース、テレビのプロデューサーを40年やってきました。回転については、アンダーヒルの慰霊祭を取材するためにアナポリスに行かさせていただきました。その時に、日本とアメリカの両方ともの視点がないと、戦争の事実はとても伝えにくいということを強く感じました。マイケルさんが日本にいらっしゃって、検証会の追悼式でスピーチされました。とても感動的なものでした。このマイケルさんの事実を伝えていくという視点をぜひ生かして、マイケルさんの協力のもと、日米でドキュメンタリームービーを作りたいというふうに考えています。
I'm Takemura, and I've been a TV program producer for 40 years here in Yamaguchi Prefecture. And I was a reporter of a memorial ceremony for Underhill in Annapolis. It was 2004. And I felt that we need to have both sides view, from American side and from Japanese side. Otherwise, it would be the report. In order to report the fact and hand down the history, true history to the younger generations, I thought it was totally necessary to have the both views. And so and I was very much moved by Mr. Mair's speech at the Kenshokai, and I believe that Mr. Mair has want to pass the true history, true facts for future, and in line with that, I want to make a movie, a film about Kaiten, and I'm now planning the project.
I forgot to Takumura-san. Yes. And would our leaders of Kaiten Kenshokai like to have other guests or speak about some of the young researchers or their future goals?
なんか研究者の、若い研究者の方、本書いている方ともおられると思うんですけど、その方についていかがでしょうか。
石部ちなみさん、あるいは伊藤彩子さん、お聞きですかね。羽鳥清子さん。
聞こえますかね。
さすが。これはしゃべるよ。
ね、研究なんて言えるようなことは何もしてないんですけれども、まあ、こういう若者の意思が結晶化して形になったものは脆いとは思うんですけど、とても純度が高いものだなと思います。私よりもずっと、若く未来の日本を本来なら若者たちが祖国を守るという、強い責任感と使命感を持って、命を捨ててまで突撃していかれたことには、忘れてはいけないことだと思います。今回の会議で他の国の方々にもこういうカイテンという兵器があったことが少しでも知られれば、カイテンの理解が深まったことをとても大切なことだと思います。
I'm also studying about Kaiten, and I cannot call it a research, but I'm working on it. And I believe that those people who are assigned as pilots and others all wanted to protect the nation, wanted to save the country. And I think it's a precious thing. And what they did should not be forgotten, should be remembered in next generation too. So I highly evaluate this program and other opportunities where we can get information on Kaiten. And I'd like the people in general to know about Kaiten and more about Kaiten. And this program works to widen the understanding of about Kaiten among people. I think it's precious. And thank you.
Yes. Todd, can you show the picture of Ms. Ito with us at the Kaiten Memorial Ceremony? Would you show that picture, please?
Let's see here.
She is with us at the ceremony. It'd be in the memorial ceremony folder.
Okay.
Both Miss Ito and Miss Ishibei we had photos of.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah, in the meantime, Nobuko, would you please thank Miss Ito and explain that I share her goal with her.
伊藤さん、どうも本当にありがとうございました。彼女は検証会の方にも、イリさんの方にも参加いただきました。
Todd's hunting for a photo.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Okay. I'm hunting for a photo. I guess I just can't picture which. Okay, maybe is it here? Here's what I'll do.
Is there one called Young Researchers, a subfolder?
Young Researchers.
Perhaps in there. It'd be Isuko Yamamoto and Miss Ito and Miss E.
Okay, hold on a second. I'm going to share this. Man, Ellie has a hard job, it turns out.
Nabucco, please explain that we're trying to find the photos of the young researchers and what they're doing to contribute to.
Oh, the young researchers. Yeah, I have that.
Yes.
Hold on.
It is your, I see the subfolder.
Young researchers, I have that. Okay, hold on. Young researchers. Yep.
Very good program. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your patience. Here is a young researcher.
While you're searching, I'd like to add, unfortunately in Japan, we haven't taught all the war histories in school. Everything read with the military considered or enforced to understand all the things done by military are evils. That's one of the mistakes for Japanese education, to teach what truth and not truth is not truth. They didn't teach the fact. That is why there's quite a few members interested in war history in the younger generation.
Yeah, could I ask Hiro-san to comment on the Yamamoto, the picture we just had, the young man with Hiro-san and myself.
山本君は今日仕事で
Right there, Senior Todd.
出られませんということで、メッセージお伝えした通りです。で、彼はいろいろ回転の事実を研究して、それを正しい情報として皆さんに伝えたいという気持ちで、回転のいろんなことを勉強しているそうです。以上です。
Yes, I'd like to talk on behalf of Mr. Yamamoto, who is a young researcher on Kaiten, and unfortunately he is at work and he could not join this program. And he's making research and collecting data on Kaiten, and he says he wants to clarify the information on Kaiten, and so that we can pass the true history, true facts on Kaiten for future.
I enjoyed this young man, and in this conversation, in this photo, I have given him a small bottle of oil from Mississinewa, recovered by the U.S. Navy. He's wearing a Mississinewa cap on his head, and Hiro-san is pointing to me and saying, teacher, and pointing to young Yamamoto and say, student. So for the rest of the time I was there on the island, young Yamamoto always called me teacher. You can share that, Nabucco.
山本さんと会ったの非常にいい体験だったんですけども、彼はミシシナワの油とかも持っていて、で、山本さんはヒロさんの生徒ということで、ヒロさんが先生で、自分は、生徒であるということで、そこでいまして、大津島でお会いしたときは先生と呼んでいました。
Could we talk a little bit about the Kaiten Memorial Museum? And also, it has been my wish for a long time that an exhibit be put together to help the visitors understand the American side, the American point of view, as well as all the wonderful things from the Japanese side. As I went through the museum, I was very interested, of course, in everything. And my wife, Nancy, explained to our Kaiten Kenshokai guests that it is a very good thing that all of the explanation is in Japanese, or Mike would be here for 3 days.
記念館も訪問したんですけども、で、日本語の表示が多かったので、ここはもう3日もいたいっていうようなことを、私の妻も言っていました。で、検証会 ごめんなさい。記念館での展示のことについて、もし何かあれば、ちょっとアメリカの方の、関係の展示もしたらどうかというような話も聞いておりますけど、そこら辺いかがでしょうか。
はい。記念館、管轄しているのは周南市です。で、周南市の文化スポーツ課とこれから調整しますけども、一応記念館の担当者とは、これからはアメリカのいろんなその回転の犠牲となられた人たち、それからそれな遺品とかですね、沈んだ船の遺品とか、そういうものをできれば今後、回転記念館で展示して、いろんな日本からあるいは世界中の人が来ていただくときにそれを見ていただくということで、回転について、これから私たちが本当に平和を広げるためにはどのようにしたらいいかということを考えるための資料として、進めていきたいと思います。だから今ではほとんど日本だけの資料でしたけども、今後はマイケル・ベアさんからいただいたオイルの資料とか、それから写真とか、さまざまなものを展示していきたいと思います。それを周南市と調整いたします。
The Kaiten Memorial Museum is run by Shunan City. So I'd like, we need to talk with the city before we do anything. But I have already talked with the staff at the museum about the display, the exhibition of the lyrics or the information from American side. So I'd like every visitor to see the display of, of course, the Japanese materials and also the US materials. For example, the oil from Mississinewa or photos or some relics from American side as suggested by Mr. Mair. In order to expand peace in the world, we'd like to use the memorial museum, and so in order to do that, we need to show the materials from both sides.
And also, too, these stories are the most important to a museum. And there is a tiny handful of Mississinewa families where there are very important stories that will connect to the Kikasui mission and the legacy of Kaiten pilots and American sailors. To give you an example of artifacts, if you could explain, I'll hold this up. This is a piece of the hull of USS Mississinewa. This was presented to me by the United States Navy when they took the oil off the ship in 2003. This is one of my prized possessions, and I want it to be in the Kaiten Memorial Museum. If you could explain that.
その回転をめぐる物語というのを菊水隊のこと、菊水のその漆での作戦について、その物語を記念館で示したいと思っています。それはもう日本の海底の方、またアメリカのそのクルーもこれをレガシーなので伝えていきたいと思っています。私は今ちょっとお見せしたものは2003年に私がミシシネワから持ってきたものなんですけれども、こういうものも展示して説明できればと思います。
さっきのはミシシネワ2003年に米海軍が回収したミシシネワの船体の一部です。船体、春っていうのは船体です。船体の一部です。
ありがとうございます。
最後に、lastly, I like to add this. In Japan, we have a good saying. The enemy yesterday is a good friend today. So we both fought for the country. Every younger generation fought for their country on their mind. But once the war was over, no side.
Arigato. Hope you can see. If I can, Nancy, help me out here. This is my father, John Mair's Navy dress blue uniform. This is his uniform that he wore at the end of his service during the Pacific War. He left the Navy in May of 1946. These are the campaign ribbons. These signify the various battles or actions that he was in, and there are 3 tiny bronze stars. These are referred to as battle stars. They are significant in that they note the 4 significant battle actions Mississinewa was part of. This means a great deal to me. This is my father's naval uniform. Without my father, John Mair, there would have been no Kaiten book.
これは私の父が着ていたその当時のユニフォームです。1946年にこれを着て戦っていたわけですけれども、ご覧になるようにいろいろな飾りがついていまして、それは、星やそういった飾りがついていますけど、それは、4つの大きな作戦に関わったと、その戦争に行ったという証拠になるものです。父がいなければ、この私の本回転というのはできませんでしたので、私はこのユニフォーム、父のことを大変、貴重に思っております。
ちょっとお聞きします。今言われたのは、彼のお父様の軍服なんですが、略銃と言います。日本語ではリボンという、リボン、英語ではリボン、日本語では略銃と言います。その星がついてあります。この星は、それぞれの作戦に参加したときに星が同じ勲章をもらうんですが、同一勲章を2つつけるんではなくて、星をつけることで、この勲章をその作戦で得たという意味で、同一勲章を何回ももらったという意味で星がつきます。そういうことです。
My father would be honored if his uniform was part of the display at the Kaiten Memorial Museum. I feel very strongly about this because my father had always told me that he did not want his generation to be forgotten. And what they had done, they performed their duty for their country. He also said that the Kaiten pilots were young men like him doing their duty for their country. I think that is something future generations need to understand. The uniform to me signifies that.
記念館にこの制服も飾っていただけることを願っておりますけれども、私の父がいつも言っていましたのは、私たちの世代を忘れないでほしい。国のために戦った、自らの義務を行使した。そしてカイテンの人たち、若い人たちも同じです。国のために戦い、国を守るために、自らのすべきことをした。そういうことを若い世代に忘れないでほしい。そういう意味で、この制服を大変大切に思っています。
Nabucco, thank you. Todd, would you please take things over?
Yes, I want to thank all our guests. First of all, those who joined us all the way from Japan. We're very honored and grateful that you've joined us tonight.
日本からご参加いただきまして、本当に皆さんありがとうございました。
And Mike, thank you also for joining us and for guiding this conversation. Greg Kota, I especially want to invite you. Email me, please, Todd, Todd, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. I put it in the chat. I want to talk to you. I'd love to have you on again to talk about your 32
I'm
years.
sorry. My mistake. I was a little 40 minutes behind this program started, but I'm really happy to join with you. And
yes, I'm happy you.
And I was really impressed with the Mike's father's, based on the Mike father's history on the subject, the materials I translated. And I was really, from the point of retired Navy officer, I was really impressed with that descriptions. And I was happy to and honored my privilege to participate in the translation of the materials. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
Captain,
you so much.
I hope to be in touch with you again. And Colonel Coyle, I'll be in touch with you also. Thank you all.
Thank
And good night, everybody. Maybe I'll see you
Can I-
Thursday night. Good night.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
Ask you one question. Todd.
Yes.
Coyle.
Jack.
I'd like to mention to everybody about Jack Barsky's interviews coming up.
Yep.
Jack's a personal friend of mine. His story sounds like a fantasy.
Yes.
It's all true. And he has the most beautiful daughter, which changed his life coming to the United States. It's unbelievable, but I highly recommend everybody watch that one.
Thursday night at 7 p.m. right here in this Zoom room, Jack Barsky with Pete Mecca and Jack Coyle.